What is anxiety? Hi everyone, welcome to the video. Kim here, chartered psychologist and cognitive behavioural psychotherapist. Now, anxiety is something that all of us will suffer from at some point in our life, depending obviously on our situation. And if you think about anxiety, there are probably two types of anxiety. So we have trait anxiety. So depending on our family of origin and how much anxiety there is in our genes, we may be more or less anxious on that continuum, say from 0 to 100. I know in my family, I'm quite high on trait anxiety. All my family have been quite anxious. My children are both quite anxious. So anxiety definitely runs in my family. I am genetically predisposed towards being anxious about things. However, we could also be in a state of anxiety. That's even if you have very low trait anxiety. For example, if you're going to get test results from a doctor, if your child is ill, going for an interview, going into an exam, all of these will put you in a state of anxiety. So, but if you have high trait anxiety and you're in a state of anxiety, your anxiety levels are probably going to be slightly higher than other people's. But we're all hardwired to be anxious because it's that system, that fight and flight system, which helps to keep us safe. It wants us out of danger. It wants us being looked after. So we will find a way to get out of whatever situation is making us anxious so that we don't have to sit there and tolerate it. However, by doing that, by leaving an anxious situation each time, we don't learn that actually we're more than capable of coping with most of the anxiety that we face, and avoiding it is actually not very helpful, but more of that later. So anxiety has an effect on our body. It kind of affects us in three ways. It affects how we behave, it affects how we think, and it affects our physiology. It affects what goes on in our body, because that fight and flight system is a very old system which helps to get us out of danger. Most mammals have this fight and flight, well, I say all of them have this fight and flight system. So if you're a little deer prancing about on the savannah, for example, and you hear a rustling in the breeze, in the bushes, you're going to actually bolt out of there. You're going to stop what you're doing because the threat system works on better safe than sorry. It may be a lion or it may be the wind, but you don't know. So it's better to get the heck out and get to safety, and then you can go back to doing what you want. So we're all hardwired with this. But unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, humans have developed this kind of tricky brain because the little deer, once it's got away from whatever it was that thought threatened it, it will just go back to its daily life. The homeostasis will return, it will calm down, and it will just carry on eating grass or eating its lunch or having a little nap or whatever it was doing. Humans don't do that. We then start overthinking things because we've got this other brain, which I'll do another video on, which will talk about how the brain affects anxiety and how that's stimulating all our physiological symptoms and systems. So anxiety is normal. We all have it. It's part of being a human being. But if it gets out of hand, that's when it can cause us a problem and make our life very, very difficult. So being anxious actually has a physical effect on you, because when the emotion of anxiety is triggered, you are releasing hormones into the bloodstream to get you ready, to prepare you for fight, flight or freeze. It's helping you to get out of danger, and if you can't get away, to actually fight your corner. So one of the things which happens is you'll start this sort of feeling of nervousness or anxiety, and we all know what that feels like. It kind of is a whole body feeling, a whole body sensation, and it feels actually really unpleasant and makes you just want to get the heck out of there as quickly as possible. So you'll notice it, your whole body will be struggling from it and suffering from it. Then it may actually cause you sleep problems, and this can happen in a number of ways. If you're very, very anxious and you're overthinking things and you're kind of worrying, you're going to not be able to sleep. You're going to find it very difficult to switch your mind off, to actually just calm yourself down and just go to sleep normally. So it may be a problem of getting to sleep. However, there is also the problem of early waking, when you just kind of almost wake up bolt upright and you're not quite sure why it is, but you just can't get back to sleep. So your sleep is disturbed, you're not getting enough sleep, and it's not good quality sleep. And it's great now that we've got things like Fitbits and Apple Watches where you can actually track your sleep and look at the amount of good sleep that you're getting and making sure that you're getting enough cycles, because things are much more easy to cope with when you've had a good night's sleep. So sleep is really important, and that's one of the things when I'm seeing patients for the first time and in assessment, I will always inquire about how they're sleeping, because that tells you a lot about what's actually going on in their inner world. Because if they're unable to sleep or are waking early, you know that there's something in there which is disturbing them. You may not be aware of it. It may just be kind of like this word salad going on in your brain, but it is actually affecting you. And if it's affecting your sleep, it will be affecting your whole physiology. And then, of course, we'll get the heart rate increase, because when the hormones are released into the body, they're getting you ready for fight and flight. So it wants to increase the heart rate, so you get adrenaline going around to actually get you ready, because you want to pump blood to the rest of the parts of the body more quickly, so that you can actually either run, so it goes to the legs and the hands, so that you can either fight. So your heart rate will increase, so it's actually allowing you to do the things that you need to do to get out of the situation, or, as I said, to fight. And you'll probably, sometimes you can even almost feel this in your chest, and it feels really unpleasant. And if you're disturbed by a thought and you get this pounding in the chest, and you're in a situation where you're at work and you're in a meeting, it's actually really uncomfortable. It feels really awful, and you have that sort of almost feeling of agitation that you just want to get the heck out of there, and you just want to run, and you're not quite sure how to do it, and it can be quite difficult to cope with. In future videos, I will be looking at ways in which you can actually kind of bring this system down and actually start calming yourself down, so that this doesn't affect you too badly. And then that will lead to a shortness of breath, because we then tend to shallow breathe. We breathe in the upper part of our chest. So you're going to get you ready to get out of there, to do what you need to do. And that can feel really uncomfortable. And it can actually almost make you feeling a little bit dizzy, and you're not quite sure what's going on. And it does feel quite unpleasant, but you just can't stop that kind of almost panting to get yourself ready for fight and flight. And of course, that may cause the heating of the body, which will cause you to sweat, because this is the body's way of actually cooling you down and keeping you safe, so you're able to carry on doing the things you want to do, because you've got that increased heart rate. So you're probably going to slightly colour up as well. So your body is actually warmer, because you've got more blood flowing to the extremities, more blood in the face, in the brain, to get you able to cope with things. So you're going to start sweating, and that can feel very uncomfortable as well. And especially when your body, if it hopefully will return to normal and will just calm down, you might feel a little bit cool and a little bit cold, but that can be quite unpleasant. But it is a natural phenomenon. It's something which the body needs to do to actually start to regulate it. But that's one of the symptoms which I often, especially with those who are socially anxious, worry about, because they worry that people are going to see them sweat, and that they feel that they've got kind of rivulets kind of dropping down their face, but actually they haven't. It is just probably a normal amount of sweating, but it does feel very uncomfortable. And you might tremble, because you're in such a state, your muscles are tense and everything is kind of, you're holding on, and so your body has a tendency then to kind of tremble, and that can again feel really uncomfortable, really unpleasant, and you're kind of not quite sure how you are appearing to other people. You may think you're actually some kind of quivering wreck, when actually it's probably just more of a slight tremble, but it does feel uncomfortable. It feels very unpleasant, and you worry then about how you're living in the minds of others. How are they viewing you? Do they think that you're this kind of trembling person who can't cope with anything? And that can be kind of then set off another cycle of anxiety for you. And of course, the muscles tense up, because when you think about it, when you're angry or when you're getting ready to fight, you are going to tense your muscles, and especially the shoulders here. So I don't know if you notice, when you're sitting at your desk, if you've got a very important meeting coming up and you're feeling very anxious about it, your kind of shoulders rise up. And that's part of how we know that we're feeling stressed and tense. But if you keep doing that, you will get terrible muscle tension in the back of your neck and in your shoulders, and that can then come right across the forehead and actually give you headaches, and that can be really unpleasant. I know I've suffered from those before when I've worked with very bullying bosses. It was awful, and so you kind of constantly feel in a state of tension, and you do feel that ache, and it's almost impossible to relax. But again, in other videos I've got coming up, I will be helping, showing you how to actually release this tension, how to completely relax the body, each part of it, so that you can get rid of that muscle tension. Because sometimes you don't even realize that that's actually happening. So when you are, so notice yourself when you're getting tense, how you kind of come up and how your shoulders will ache. And so just remind yourself to deep breath, shoulders back and down, always shoulders back and down, open chest, signals to the brain, I'm okay. Because when you're like this, you're either ready to fight or you're feeling sad or upset about something or anxious. So muscle tense up. And then you get a dry mouth because, of course, if you're getting ready to fight or to run, you don't actually need to be producing saliva, which is the aid to digestion, because the digestive tract starts to kind of shut down. Because it doesn't matter if you're being chased by a lion, if you digest your lunch, because if the lion gets you, not a problem. Your lunch doesn't need to be digested, so you need to get away, because all the parts of the body which aren't needed to actually save you or to help you fight this thing are actually shut down. So your mouth will go dry. I don't know if any of you have ever been into an interview, and I know I certainly have, when they ask you your name and your mouth is almost so dry you can hardly say who you are, and it feels really weird. So that's why I think they always give you a glass of water when you're having an interview, because they know that's going to happen, because you're feeling very, very anxious. And it can also make you feel quite nauseous, because like I said, the digestive tract is kind of shut off, so you're not digesting your food at that point. So it can make you feel a bit nauseous. So there's a lot going on there when you're feeling very anxious. And if you're not aware that this is an anxiety response, you might wonder what on earth is going on? Why on earth am I feeling like this? And it can feel very, very unpleasant and very frightening. And then the tingling in the arms and legs. And this is something that a lot of people get very frightened about. They wonder, why on earth are my fingers tingling and my feet tingling? Because I don't know what's going on, and they can't quite explain it. Well, that's because the blood has come into the arms and legs to get you ready for running or for fighting. Because you often hear in sort of folklore these people who are able to kind of lift heavy cars with their children stuck underneath it, and they have this kind of superhuman bionic strength because of the adrenaline which has kind of like surged through their body, and they just find this strength from somewhere. And that's what we need when we're going to fight or run. We need to be able to go quickly, and we need to be able to fight. So our arms need to be stronger, our muscles need to be ready. So you get this tingling, and it feels really kind of weird or pins and needly, and it can be quite disconcerting actually. And a lot of people, when I'm in my clinic, when they say, I feel really weird and I don't like it, and they don't know how to explain it, and it makes them feel almost unsafe, as if something bad's going to happen to them. But it is a normal part of the anxiety response, the fight and flight response. And then, of course, you've got the butterflies in the stomach. And that feels kind of awful because, again, like I said, the gastric juices have shut down. So you get that tingling and that in your stomach. But it can also lead to IBS if this goes on for a long time. So the more anxious, if you're anxious a lot, it does have an effect on your bowel movements, which again can be very anxiety provoking in and of itself, because you're constantly worrying. Are you going to be able to get to the toilet? Are you going to be able to cope? Will other people realize? Will other people know that I've got this problem because I can't seem to control myself? Usually you can control yourself, but if you're worrying about it, it's kind of constantly on your mind. So it's going to be triggering anxiety in you a lot more, which is going to make the problems of your stomach even worse. And then it can lead to slight vision problems because you're honing in ready to deal with the threat. So your vision, it's almost like tunnel vision you get just to deal with that threat, because it doesn't matter what's going on over there, or down there. What you want to know is, how am I going to deal with this threat? So I need to know what this threat is. So it can make your vision seem a little bit weird. And again, that freaks people out and makes you feel really uncomfortable. And what on earth is the matter with me? And this is the one which most people I know, especially those who suffer from panic attacks, find it really frightening. It's this feeling, sort of almost faint, but sort of slightly depersonalized, because it's not like an out-of-body experience. Well, it's sort of like an out-of-body experience, but you're kind of not feeling quite in yourself. you're feeling sort of out there. And that's when a lot of people think, oh my God, am I going crazy? What's happening to me? This feels awful and it's really frightening. And that triggers even more anxiety and more threat and stress within them, and is very difficult to deal with if you're not sure what it is. But there are exercises, things that I'll be coming on to later in the program, which will actually help you to kind of come back down and to control this horrible feeling. So that's the physiological response, but it can also affect how you think. Because when you're anxious, everything in your brain is geared towards dealing with threat. That's all you are going to be doing. So everything you think about, you imagine, your memories are all going to be threat-based, because this is where you are at the moment. It's colouring. It's like you've got threat glasses on and it's colouring it. So it's going to affect your thinking. And depending on the type of anxiety that you have will depend on what kind of things that you start to think about. But most people are doing a lot of what ifing. What if this happens? And it's never what if I win the lottery, or what if I have a wonderful day tomorrow, or what if something great happens. It's usually what if the worst happens? What if I can't do this? What if this I don't know that? What if I get run over? So if you're what ifing, what you're doing is you are taking yourself into some future catastrophe, which you've got no control over because it's in the future. I mean, usually what ifs are what we call hypothetical situations. So they're not concrete, because you know that what if I don't fill in my tax return? Well, you'll be fined, and they will keep coming after you until you've done it. But what if I get hit by a bus? Well, you can't know for sure you'll never get hit by a bus, but the chances are it's not going to happen. But if you get caught up in this what ifing about it, you might all of a sudden, your chain of thought has gone on to all the different things that you need to do, how you need to protect yourself, how you need to stay safe. And you just what if, and you're constantly sending yourself into threat. In fact, you could paper your whole house with what ifs, and most of them will never happen. You might worry, what if other people are talking about you, especially if you're socially anxious. Your thinking will be all around, do they think I'm stupid? What if they're talking about me? What if I say the wrong thing? Am I standing correctly? Do I look intelligent? Do I look stupid? Do I look thick? Am I sounding all right? Is my voice okay? And you're actually living inside of your head. You're not actually in the conversation. You're not in the flow of it, because you're up here. You're thinking. So social anxiety, you'll be thinking all these awful things about yourself, being quite critical, and you'll be thinking about what other people are thinking about you. So you're not actually there in the moment with them. If you have OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, you may be thinking about checking things, checking locks, checking plugs, contamination. So there'll be lots of things which you are thinking about. Your thinking gets completely out of whack. And it actually almost takes over your life, because you're just thinking. And again, that will be something which will affect your sleep, because you'll be lost in your thoughts. You're right in your head. And if you're in your head and you're in the future, you are not in the present moment. You're not in the here and now. And there's nothing we can do about the future as it stands, obviously, until we get there. So worrying about what if you get hit by a bus today isn't going to actually help you in any way, because you obviously, as long as you're obeying the law, the highway code, so to speak, the chances are you're not going to be hit by a bus, but it will affect your thinking. So anxiety really does affect your thinking, because it's linked to obviously emotions as well. So the anxiety is triggering negative thoughts, which are then triggering negative emotions and negative physiology in your body. So that's that vicious cycle. The other way anxiety affects us, other than obviously our thoughts, is also our behaviour. What do we do? How do we behave? It makes us behave differently, because if you're very anxious, and you probably could think of examples, if I asked you to come up with an example of when you were very anxious about something, what did you do? How did you behave differently than if you'd been very calm in that situation? Because it affects you in a number of ways. First of all, it can affect you because you will start avoiding things, again, depending on the type of anxiety that you have. So if you are socially anxious, you may stop going to parties. You may stop accepting invitations to things. You may not go to networking events, which may be very important for your job. And there you're missing out on a whole way of meeting new people, people who could be helpful to you in the future, and of learning new things. So you're just cutting them out. You may stop seeing friends as well because you are afraid of what they might be thinking or saying about you, or you just don't want to be in that social situation. You may stop calling people. You don't want to look at texts. You may go off WhatsApp. You may shut down all your social media. Well, sometimes that might not be a bad thing, but that kind of anxiety can actually get you to be avoiding all sorts of things. You may avoid travel. You may not want to go on planes. You may not want to go on tubes or buses. Especially, we've had a very difficult couple of years with COVID, and everybody's been very worried about traveling and what might happen to you while you're out. So I know a lot of socially anxious people have been avoiding things. Well, they haven't had to, have they? So they've not been as anxious, but now they're going back out there. They'll be very anxious because they're having to do things which they haven't done for a while, which they really worry about and obsess about and think about. Especially if you're worried about germs and contamination, you are not going to want to be traveling on the tube, on the trains. If you have panic attacks, again, you'll be very anxious about using public transport or going places because of, will I be able to get out of here? Will I be able to cope? What if I go mad? What if I can't cope with it? And you may also then start trying to avoid thoughts. And this is quite a tricky one because intrusive thoughts just intrude, they just come in. That's what they do. That's their job. They intrude in, and whether we like it or not. But if we spend a lot of time avoiding them and trying to push them out, they'll just find a way to wiggle in, and we can spend hours and hours and hours trying to avoid certain things. And it starts to narrow our life down quite a lot because it cuts down our opportunities, it cuts down things that we will accept or we will do, cuts down our job opportunities because we may not apply for a promotion, we may not want to be in certain meetings, we may not speak up. So avoidance behaviours, so we're trying to get rid of the anxiety or rid of the thoughts that we've got, can actually be quite detrimental to us on the whole. And these are something which we actually need to start facing. And again, I have a session on that, of how to find out what your safety behaviours are, because each one of us will have a whole different set of safety behaviours and avoidance behaviours. So we will help you to find out what they are and then what we can do about these avoidance behaviours and how you can actually start to face your fears. We also will seek reassurance, depending again on the type of anxiety we've got, but we might seek reassurance from our friends, family and colleagues. We'll be asking them questions, and this can actually sometimes come across as that we're perhaps a little bit needy because we keep asking, oh, what do you think? Do you think this is anything? Do you think this on my skin? Do you think that's anything? Have you ever had anything like this before? What do you think the boss was thinking of me? What did you think of the meeting? What did you think of what I said? What did you think of how I came across? So you'll be kind of obsessing and asking people constantly to reassure you. And it can wear people out a little bit, or they might get a little bit fed up with it. And you're not doing it because you're being mean or you're trying to upset people. You're doing it because your anxiety is almost compelling you to do it. Especially as, those that suffer from any kind of health anxiety, they'll be seeking reassurance from the doctors, and they go to the doctors an awful lot. And they'll look up medical journals, they'll look things up, and they'll go to the doctor and say, oh, I've got this, and what do you think? And they'll be reassured maybe for a day, and then slowly the doubt creeps in, the anxiety starts to rebuild, and then before they know it, with a day or two, they're actually feeling as anxious as they were before they went, because then they start rationalizing this to themselves. Oh, well, doctors make mistakes, or they read something in the paper. Oh my goodness me. Yeah, I saw that, I read that in the paper, that this doctor had missed this particular symptom, and then that person died of whatever it was. And so they start overthinking, and then they can wind themselves up almost into this state again, and they're as anxious as they were before. And then a lot of people look at Google. The worst thing in the world when you're anxious is to Google whatever it is you're anxious about. Because let's face it, if we look hard enough for something, we will find it. I remember when I was first studying psychology and we were doing all the personality disorders. and they were talking us through them. And I remember the lecture at the beginning that she said, I can absolutely guarantee that you'll all have nearly all of these personality disorders, or you'll know all your friends and family will have them. And actually, she was absolutely right, because every symptom she went through thinking, oh my goodness me, yes, I've got a bit of that, or I do that. So if we look for something deeply enough, we will find it, which is why Google, if you're anxious, you should be banned from Googling what it is you're anxious about. And then the other thing that we do with anxiety is we have safety behaviors, lots of them. And depending on your type of anxiety will depend on the kind of safety behaviors that you engage in. A lot of people, if they are socially anxious, they will sit at any kind of meeting or at the bar with a glass of water. They will sip water. If you have vomit phobia, metaphobia, you might sit with a glass of water as well. You're constantly just sipping, 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 because you think, okay, this will just keep everything down. Going on tubes or trains, you might take a bottle of water with you, because this helps you to feel reassured. You feel safe because you've got your bottle of water. So if you get hot, which is again is a symptom of anxiety, when you can cool yourself down with a nice drink. You may not stand near the door. You may have to sit. You may make sure you get a seat, or only travel at certain times, because it's safer to travel. Then you're going to avoid traveling in the rush hour, and you'll travel outside of the rush hour so you can get a seat, or you'll want to stand near the door so that if the train door opens, you can get yourself out. Stand near an open window. But each person will have their own little set of quirks and safety behaviors of things that they do. Maybe putting your headphones in, taking a book. These things actually just help to reassure you and keep you feeling safe. Again, you might check locks, you might check all sorts of things so that you unplugs, so that you know that everything is switched off, everything is locked, and you may go back several times, especially those with OCD. Checking will do this several times. And in and of itself, it's not a problem to check that you've locked your home and make sure it's secure. But if you have to keep going back and you don't trust yourself, then that's going to actually be detrimental to your overall mental health in the long run. Other thing people do is they feel they have to sit down, especially those who are suffering from panic. They might feel that they need to always be near a chair, so that they can sit down if they need to, because if they get that depersonalizing feeling, or you're kind of that whoosh of anxiety, you just want to sit down because you're worried that otherwise you're going to collapse, have a heart attack, or you're going to fall over. So you want to have a chair near you because it makes you feel safe. You feel secure. You will check things. You're constantly checking things that have been done, maybe your emails. If you're worrying about how people are going to be receiving you, you'll be double checking every single thing. And this can take so much time. And it's not like procrastination, but it's sort of procrastination, because you procrastinate maybe about sending things out because you're worried that you may have made a mistake. So you'll go back and you'll check. And you may start checking your phone. You'll cut social media out. You'll check your phone all the time, making sure, have I got messages? What have they said? What are people saying about me? What's going on? So there's a whole range of safety behaviors that you can engage in, so many of them, and each person will have a little different set. And the thing is, if we give in to our anxiety and we give in to the safety behaviors, they start to multiply, and we have more and more safety behaviors. And before we know it, there's whole rituals that we have to go through before we can even leave the house. And that becomes problematic. In and of itself, it's not a problem making sure that you're safe, making sure that everything's locked, and making sure that your bag is packed and you've got what you need and your keys, etc. But if it's actually getting in the way of you living your best life, then that's problematic. And we'll look at that in later videos of how we can actually start to recognize what our safety behaviors are and how we can slowly drop them. Because anxiety is its own vicious cycle, and this is the step B model, or the 5 areas model. It's called space model sometimes. But this shows you how our anxiety actually has this cycle. So depending on the situation, because not all situations will make you anxious. So have the situation, then you have the thoughts, and it's the thoughts which are going to trigger the emotion. Because if you have thoughts of no one likes me, or oh gosh, I'm going to pass out, I'm going to faint, what if I have a panic attack, or I don't know if I've done a good job, if you're having very negative, critical thoughts about yourself, the chances are you've triggered anxiety. And if you've triggered anxiety, that is triggering hormones in your body, which is then going to have a physiological effect on you, as we went through all of those things which happen from the hormones which you release. And that just happens quickly, automatically. This is very quick, this cycle. And that will in turn change your behavior. And this then becomes a vicious cycle, because if your behavior is, well, I need to make sure I'm doing all these safety things, then you're going to kind of keep this cycle going, because if I don't do it, then I'll be thinking, oh, well, it's going to be bad. It's going to be catastrophic, because you're not going to think, oh, well, it's going to be fine. Otherwise, it's not a problem for you. So you have this catastrophic thinking if you don't do what it is you're supposed to do, or if, for example, social anxiety, your behavior may be that you say nothing. You keep yourself very, very quiet. You don't speak up, and then you go home and you worry, oh, what will people have thought of me? I didn't say anything. Will they think I'm boring? Will they think I'm stupid? Will they think I've got nothing to say? Which again is triggering lots of anxious thoughts, which is triggering anxiety, and your physiological system is triggered. So this is a very vicious cycle, and it happens automatically. And in later videos, I'll be showing you how we can kind of unpack all of this and become aware of our automatic thoughts, which are triggering these emotions, and the physiology, and how we can change our behaviors. And we'll go through that very systematically, because it's important that we know what it is that we're thinking and worrying about, which is triggered, so that we can actually start to do something about it, because this happens almost outside of our awareness. But if we just keep giving into it and adding more and more safety behaviors, it's only going to get worse in the long run. So that is what anxiety is. I will be doing other videos on the different types of anxiety, because there are several different anxieties, and they have slightly different symptoms and slightly different sets of safety behaviors and slightly different things that we can do to actually help you manage and learn to control that kind of anxiety. So thank you for listening. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.